Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing a video talking about Carmelo Anthony and just where I think he might go this offseason and what I think he might end up doing. There's a lot of different things to talk about involving Carmelo, and so I'm just going to get into that a bit and give you guys some information and some of my thoughts on where he might end up playing next season. So a bit of background, Carmelo Anthony recently opted into a player option for next year, and that player option will pay him $28 million for next season if Oklahoma City were to just keep him without waiving him or trading him or anything. And the thing about that Oklahoma City does not want is that with that additional salary, they'll be so far over the cap that they will have to pay a ton in taxes for exceeding the salary cap, and they'll have to pay around $300 million in salary cap overages. Including the salary cap and the taxes for going over. But if they cut him or stretch his contract over the next couple of seasons, they could save up to $100 million in tax fees for going over the cap. And what it means by so when you waive a guy, you can just pay him his money off the away from the salary cap, and it's not included in the total. So that would be like if they just waived him straight up, they would pay him $28 million, but it wouldn't show up on the payroll. It'd just be separate from that. But if they stretch it, it means that they pay him, let's say, $4 million every year for the next 7 years instead of the $28 million all in 1 year. And that 4 over 7 years does equal 28, if you're wondering. So that's how that works. And that's, I think, what they're going to try to do is waive him and stretch it, which would be 4 for about 7 years, or they could do 7 over 4 years, something like that. But that leaves us with the idea that Carmelo Anthony could be a free agent coming up here pretty soon, and he could sign anywhere in the NBA, really. So I'm going to go with the presumption that Carmelo will be signing a deal for a veterans minimum, which I think is a little under $1 million, or around $1 million, or two. And I just have a couple of teams that I think that he could go to that I want to talk about, and a couple of teams that I don't think he could go to, but a lot of people are talking about him potentially going there. So to start off with, I'm going to be talking about the teams I don't think he has a chance of going to, because I feel like we should get those teams out of the way first and then talk about the teams that he actually might end up on. So the first team that I don't think he has any chance of going to is the Golden State Warriors. Now, I have heard some talk about this. He could be the sixth man along with Andre Iguodala. He could put up 12 points a game, be a captain of the second unit sort of thing, him and Iguodala leading the second unit. But I don't really like that idea. I just don't think that he'd be willing to play there. I don't think he'd gel there. I think that he's too ball dominant, and that goes against what they're trying to put together in Golden State. So I don't think he fits there at all. Also, I just don't really think they need him, and I don't think he'd really add anything to the team. I think what they really need is defense more so than offense, and I don't think that he brings that whatsoever. He's only an offensive player anymore, no defense. So I don't think that they need him at all, and I don't think that they would sign him if they had the opportunity, honestly. They also just signed Jonas Jerebko, so they don't really need a power forward, small forward at the time. The next team I don't think that will sign him that has been rumored a lot is the Lakers. I think this is mainly because LeBron is in Los Angeles now, and people think that they have a chance of signing him because they're good friends. But if you look at the Lakers depth chart, they have Ingram at small forward, they have Kuzma at power forward, and they have LeBron either at small forward or power forward. And really, you don't need more than 3 people to fill the 2 forward slots if they're going to be playing a lot of minutes. Like, if you put Carmelo in there, then you'd argue that LeBron maybe has to play the 1 or the 5 exclusively because there wouldn't be enough space at the small forward and power forward positions unless you're going to bump Ingram down to like 15 minutes a night and Kuzma to 20 to get Carmelo a proper amount of minutes, or maybe Carmelo will play 15 minutes a night, but I really don't see him wanting that role on a team. I see him wanting to play 30 minutes as a sixth man or a starter. So I can't see him on the Lakers, and they don't really have much salary cap space after signing all the guys they've signed, so I don't see him going there. The next team that has been rumored but I don't see happening is the Miami Heat. This is again a banana boat connection in him teaming up with Dwayne Wade. Both of them are past their primes. I don't think Dwayne Wade has enough sway in the Heat organization anymore that he could get Carmelo there. They're really deep and with guys around the same talent level as Carmelo, so I don't really need them. They have Justice Winslow, James Johnson, Kelly Olynyk plays power forward sometimes, and I just don't really think they need him. They have Dion Waiters, Wayne Ellington, Tyler Johnson also on the wing, so they don't really need him either on the wing if he were to exclusively play small forward. Dwayne Wade on the wing too. Now Ellington and Dwayne Wade are free agents, but I would assume that he only would go there if Wade was there. But still, I don't really see a big need for him. They don't really need a scorer. They already have Goran Dragic and Dion Waiters, so I don't think they need him at all. And the last team I've heard a little bit about that I kind of would want him to go to, but I don't think they really need him after some moves they made this offseason, is the Wizards. Now, I really thought he would have been good on the Wizards, sort of filling the role that Paul Pierce had about 3 years ago. But now, I really don't think that they need him. After getting Jeff Green and Austin Rivers, I just don't really see a space for him on the team. Jeff Green is going to be filling in whenever Otto Porter's out of the game, or Markieff Morris, or maybe even a little bit when Dwight Howard is out of the game. And I just don't think that they need another 3 or 4 playing for them to take up minutes, because you already have Kelly Oubre as small forward off the bench as well. So Carmelo just really doesn't fit, unless you're telling me that Jeff Green is going to exclusively play backup center, which I don't think that they'd ever do, and Carmelo is good with 14 minutes a night, which I don't think he is. So for those reasons, I don't see him going to the Wizards. And that is it for teams that I think that he won't go to for sure, but he's been rumored to be going to. And next, I'm going to move on to teams that I think he does have a realistic shot of playing for. So starting off, a very common one that everyone is talking about would be the Houston Rockets. Chris Paul has reportedly talked to management and pushed for them to get Carmelo. I think that this is an okay fit, but not a great fit. Carmelo can shoot, even though he didn't shoot well last year. I think he's still got it in him. He can break people down off the dribble, which they don't really need in Houston, but maybe, if you want to rest James Harden and Eric Gordon at the same time, having Carmelo would be useful. I think the main reason people are pairing this together is because they lost Trevor Ariza in free agency. So they think that they could go after Melo. If he signs for the minimum, they'll have space for him. Well, he could sign for the minimum and fit on any team, but in Houston, I think it would be good in that he would be playing with a friend, so maybe that would help him improve a little bit more. Or not improve, but just have a bounce-back season, and he'd be a little bit more motivated, or just enjoying himself more with a friend. That's just speculation. I don't know for sure. Sometimes that works for players, sometimes it doesn't. He'd be playing around a bunch of great players, so maybe they get more of the attention, and he would be freed up a bit more. But the main problem for Melo is that he's good in isolation basketball, where he just holds the ball on the wing, dribbles in, and gets a shot. So that's where he doesn't quite mesh with Houston, but he does in the fact that they need a small forward that can shoot, and he can fill that role. And, on a given night, he can give him 20 a game. If James Harden and either Eric Gordon or Chris Paul are struggling, he could help fill in for one of them. So that's what I think about him in Houston. Moving on, the next team on here that I think he could go to and do well with is Philadelphia. Now, that weakness that I said of him just wanting to stand on the wing and dribble and be an ISO player was a weakness in Houston because they already have Harden and Eric Gordon who can do that. But in Philadelphia, I think that's a great asset because they don't have anyone that can do that. Ben Simmons can't because he doesn't have a jump shot, so people don't have to respect him, and they can just ease off of him and only guard him in the paint. J.J. Redick doesn't have good enough handles to do that and can't really finish as well as Melo. Saric is just a spot-up shooter. Embiid is a good center, but he can't dribble, can't take anyone off the dribble. He can't ISO. And Robert Covington is also just basically a spot-up shooter, and they don't really have much of a bench who can do that. Markelle Fultz can a little bit. He's like Simmons in that he doesn't have a jump shot. So that leaves them with a hole for a guy that can basically just go ISO and score when you just need a basket at any point in the game. And that's where I think Melo would fit great. You might have heard in a previous video of mine or just from other sources that Philly really wants Kawhi, because he would fill that role, a guy that can score from the outside, can take you off the dribble, can finish at the rim. He would really fit that role well. Melo would, on offense. He's not much of a defender, and Philly's a decent team on defense already, so they don't desperately need a good defender. Robert Covington, first team all defense. Joel Embiid, second team all defense. So they're decent on defense. Ben Simmons is good at 6'10", playing point guard. He can defend point guards pretty well. So I don't need that. So I really like Melo in that fit. I think that they'd be the clear-cut number 2 in the East then after Boston. I think that makes a lot of sense too, because although you have Simmons and Embiid, I don't really count on anyone else to have consistent scoring performances. I like Redick and Covington and Saric a lot, but I feel like any of them can sort of have like a 5-point game, and it wouldn't be like crazy to have that happen. But with Carmelo, I feel like he's a guy who, on his worst night, he's going to give you 14 points, and on his best night, he'll give you 25. So I really like that fit for Carmelo in Philadelphia. Moving on, a team that I don't think many people would be thinking of for this, but to fill the same role as in Philly would be with the Pistons in Detroit. I think Carmelo would fit well. They do have James Ennis and recently signed Glenn Robinson III at small forward and Blake at power forward, but I still feel like Carmelo would be an upgrade over either Glenn Robinson or James Ennis and could play a little bit of power forward when Blake Griffin's out of the game. He is filling the void that they have of, same with Philadelphia, not having someone that can score off the dribble and shoot simultaneously. Sort of a guy that you could just give the ball at the end of the game and say, go get us a basket. Ish Smith at point guard can't really do that. Another point guard they have who plays a little bit of shooting guard is Reggie Jackson, and he can't really do that because he doesn't have enough of a shot. James Ennis is a spot-up shooter. Glenn Robinson's offensive game isn't developed enough yet for that. Blake Griffin, doesn't have good enough handles for that. Andre Drummond, obviously not. And they don't really have any bench, so Carmelo would perfectly fit there, and I think he could be averaging 18 to 20 points a game. That might be my favorite fit for him, and he would still be like, you'd argue he'd be about the third offensive option because Blake would probably be number 1, and him and Drummond would probably be like 2A and 2B, but they probably want to emphasize Drummond more, so Carmelo would probably be the 3, but that's still a really good third option to me. Next team I have down that would be good for him is the Jazz. Jazz are a great defensive team, but are lacking a bit on offense. They have Ricky Rubio, who's an okay point guard, doesn't have the range to be a serious offensive threat night in and night out. They have Donovan Mitchell, who's an absolute stud, so you have to respect him on all accounts. I think that he's a rising star in the NBA, obviously. And he is a guy that can break a person down off the dribble and can shoot, so he is a great ISO threat if you need that, like at the end of a game, just go get us a bucket. Mitchell can be that, but on a lot of teams, you need more than just one player that can be a versatile scorer. You look at the best team in the NBA the past couple of years, it's been the Warriors, who have had both Durant, who's an offensive scorer, a versatile offensive scorer, and Curry, who can get you baskets in a number of ways. Before that, the dominant team in the NBA was the Heat, who had both Bosh, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade, who could get you buckets in a number of ways. Really, LeBron and Wade were the ones beating you off the dribble and could just go ISO and score at will. Also, before that, you had the dominant team for a while was the Spurs, who had Parker and Ginobili, who could both beat you in ISO scenarios and off the dribble. So I think the thing, I'm not saying that this is an ISO league anymore, but I just think that people need to realize that you need to have guys who can score in a versatile number of ways and can be good off the dribble, because ultimately, in certain situations, you just need to say, go get us a bucket to certain guys, because sometimes the plays and running the system doesn't always work in critical situations. So I think Carmelo could be good there, because they were averaging pretty low as far as points per game last year. In the playoffs, they were around 100 or 101, which is not very high at all, obviously, compared to a team like the Warriors, who was averaging about 111. So yeah, I think that they could use him. I don't think Joe Ingles is a guy that can fill that role adequately to be an off the dribble guy, beat guys off the dribble. I mean, and Alec Burks is kind of like the failed prototype of that, where he's supposed to be able to beat guys off the dribble but can't. And Jay Crowder is more of a spot up shooter and a defender, a 3-and-D guy than an offensive weapon. And if they wanted to go small, they could throw Carmelo at the 4. I think he'd be more comfortable there than Joe Ingles or Jay Crowder for that matter. So I think that he could be a good fit in Utah. And if they got him, they'd probably be around the 3rd seed in the West next year, I'd say. Because I think besides Houston and Golden State, there'd be no team definitively better than them. Moving on, the next team I have on here is the Milwaukee Bucks. This one's with a bit of an asterisk. I would say that they only would get him if Jabari Parker leaves. I think that they're essentially the same type of player, small forward's body, but more of a power forward in today's NBA. Can score around 16 to 20 points a game. And so if Jabari leaves, I'd suggest that they sign Melo because he can just perfectly fill that role and be exactly what Jabari was on their team the past 2-3 years. So moving on, the next team I have that I think would be really interesting would be the New Orleans Pelicans. And for a similar reason as some of these other teams like Philadelphia, you know, they have the great big man in Anthony Davis, and they have a good point guard in Drew Holiday and Julius Randle now and Nikola Mirotic. But the thing that they're really lacking is a guy that can just be a wing scorer, either by shooting or off the dribble. They don't have a guy that can just take the ball and get a basket if they need it. Like, Davis is great, but you can't just give him the ball in the wing and say, create. Whereas Carmelo can really create his own offense, which is a great asset of his that is, you know, it's not hard to come by necessarily, but not every team has it. And I think if you put him on New Orleans, that really completes them. Slot him into small forward and have Mirotic come off the bench instead of having the big lineup. And you could have Davis at center, Randle at power forward, Carmelo at small forward, with Mirotic coming in to sub in for each of them and give each of them a rest. And that would be a really good rotation at the forward spots and the center. So yeah, he'd be really interesting to see there. I'd sign him to just a 1-year deal, and if it really doesn't work, you can just get rid of him, because I don't think that they expected to be like a championship team this year anyway, so he would be a decent fit for them. And moving on to the last team I have for Carmelo, which I think would be a bit of a stretch. I don't think it would really happen, but could be interesting, and maybe they should look into, would be the San Antonio Spurs. Now I'm going to hit you with some facts about the Spurs. Out of every playoff team this last year, they averaged the least amount of points, 96, and they shot the worst percentage of anybody, which was 40% in the playoffs. I know what you're thinking. They already have Kawhi and Rudy Gay to fill up the 3 spot, and Rudy Gay plays a little bit of the 4. You have LaMarcus Aldridge at the 4 spot, Pau Gasol at the 5. But I still think that they could use Carmelo. This is especially if Kawhi leaves. If Kawhi stays and plays for them, they don't really need him. But this is if Kawhi leaves. Then they could theoretically start Rudy Gay at the 3, Carmelo at the 4, and have LaMarcus at the 5. Because it's going towards that type of a league where you can play your traditional power forward at the 5 and have a bigger small forward at the 4, which would be with Carmelo playing the power forward. Pau Gasol could come off the bench because I think that suits him well in his older age. And they're going to need more of an offensive punch if Kawhi is gone. And I think if anybody could deal with Carmelo's ego and personality, it would be Popovich, and he could get the most out of him and help him perform really well in his system, and it could be a really good fit, you know. So I just want to make this video because I feel like I've heard a lot of television personalities and blogs and stuff talking about how no team really needs Carmelo or he wouldn't fit anywhere. But I think that there's plenty of teams that are on the rise or are actually already playoff contenders that could really use him. And he does have a great offensive repertoire that is rare to come by, and he can be a force if in the right situation, and can be an effective role player or prominent player in a serious contender in the NBA. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you let me know what you think in the comments. If you have Any disagreements or any thoughts that you want to share, go ahead and share them, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye.